So it was a dramatic 24 hours for Russia on Saturday. We're learning more about this today. Obviously, this is attempted coup and a quick de-escalation of the Wagner mercenaries who marched upon Moscow on Saturday.
So that defence minister who was singled out for criticism by the Wagner mercenaries, Sergei Shoigu, he's been seen for the first time. And get this, the Emir of Qatar, that's where we had the World Cup, didn't we? In a phone call with Putin, has expressed his support for the Kremlin. Disgraceful. So let's bring in Head of Counter-Terrorism, MOD Major General Chip Chapman. Good morning, Chip.
Good morning, Beth.
Good morning. Now, I thought about you over the weekend when there was this attempted coup, because I think it was in one of the conversations with you when you said that one of the best hopes for the end of this war in Ukraine was that Putin might be overthrown by forces on his side. Did you have the same initial thought at the weekend?
No, because I don't think it was a coup attempt. So it was completely different. And what Prigozhin did was he miscalculated and overreached. And in Putin's response, he's miscalculated and underreached. So really what Prigozhin tried to do was threefold. He had three objectives. The first one is he sought to remove Shoigu and Gerasimov. He's been railing against them for a number of months, that he, particularly when he was in Bakhmut, has not been getting the resources to prosecute his successful part of the war as he saw it well. The second thing that he wanted strategically to get Putin to prosecute the war better and more efficiently. He wants to see more waves of mobilization of manpower and the industrial base ramped up. And the third one is he sought to maintain the Wagner independent of the Russian MOD. They were due to sign a contract by the 1st of July. He didn't want that to happen so he could keep his independence. So it wasn't a coup. It was supposed to be leverage. But as I say, he overreached. The problem for Putin is that he did nothing for 3 months when Prigozhin was pushing the boundaries. And it undermines Putin's domestic authority and standing. And that is the weakness that he's shown. You can't in 1 minute say that he's a traitor who's going to be crushed, and then the next minute do a deal with him when at the same time you've had 9 aircraft shot down by the Wagner Group, which was 6% of all the combat losses that the Russian Air Force have taken in the last 16 months. So that undermines him. It's not necessarily fatal because he's been in power for 24 years and he's had the time there to hack people's mind, to get rid of dissent, but it does weaken him and opens a sort of flank for the future. And if that political flank goes, then the military flank can go at the same time.
What do you think will happen now with the Wagner Group mercenaries, Chip?
Well, they will be incorporated into the Ministry of Defence. So that is now being signed up. So Prigozhin didn't get his independence. So any notion that people have said of 25,000 people suddenly joining Prigozhin in Belarus for a flank that might attack Ukraine from there is farcical. It's just that's not going to happen. So in terms of their role in Russia, that will be over. They do still have a role elsewhere. So, for example, there's 1,000 Wagner people in Mali. They have $11 million contract for training and support there a month. A lot of them are in Sudan. That was one of my worries when we went in for the evacuation. They have always been sort of under the role, in a way, of the Russian authority. So the Wagner Group wasn't really a completely independent state. It did have links to the GRU and other intelligence agencies. And indeed, one of the things when I first came across Prigozhin about 8 years ago was he was bankrolling a thing called the Internet Research Agency, which is the Russian troll farm in St. Petersburg.
How did a former hot dog salesman from the back streets of Moscow rise to such extraordinary levels of power and to be head of this army for hire?
Well, access brings you influence. He had access to Putin, all the time in his ascent to power, and that was one of his gripes at the moment. So he had lost that access in the last 3 months. He thought he could regain it again, and he couldn't. That's why I think he was shocked with Putin's reaction. He thought that Putin was still an ally of him. His gripe really was with just Shoigu and Gerasimov, and that was the miscalculation he made, and the sort of warnings from the FSB, that's the intelligence agency which took over from the KGB. So he was on a losing wicket from that moment on, and rather like a psychological model called the prisoner's dilemma, you either stay loyal or defect. Now, people stayed loyal it wasn't a coup in that sense. If there was any quasi-coup behind this and people were in favour of Prigozhin, you'll see a night of the long knives, a purge in the next week or two by Putin to get rid of those recalcitrants who favoured Prigozhin and his march on Moscow. But you don't run a coup by telegraphing that you're hundreds of miles away without decapitating the leader and taking over the organs of the media. So it wasn't a coup in the slightest.
Understood. What happens now in Ukraine, Chip? It looks like the never-ending war at the moment, doesn't it? What chances are there of any sort of peaceful resolution by the end of this year?
Well, that's a million-dollar question. It could be if the politics we've already said are complicated for Russia. One of the theories of victory for the Ukrainians, rather like 1917, when essentially the Russian army marched off the battlefield after a thing called the Kerensky Offensive in 1917, is that may still happen. If you're fighting at the front and you're not sure what you're fighting for, and the Ukrainian offensive becomes more successful, which I think it will because they haven't committed all their combat power, that again is an open flank. So that is one of the ways that this could end, with the Russian army just walking off the battlefield. Because although Ukraine thought it had a Russia problem, Russia now sees that Russia has a Russia problem. And that's always dangerous for your state in going forward.
Chip, just finally, lots of headlines in the newspapers today and on radio and TV. Are we seeing getting closer to the last act of Putin's 23-year reign?
I don't think so, not in the short term. And by that, I'm going to say the next month, because, authoritarian states and authoritarian leaders are very difficult to dispossess. The agency who are around in protecting him, not just the security agencies of the KGB, the FSB and GRU and all that, but his FSO, the personal protection body around him, are still solid. If they start breaking off from him, he's got a problem. We don't see that happening at the moment.
OK, thank you so much, Chip Chapman there.